What happens to schools when the children leave? The teachers never return, and time itself becomes the only student in the halls. Some say old schools are just empty buildings, but others whisper that they remember everything, every laugh, every scream, every secret that was never meant to be heard again. What happens to schools when the children leave? The teachers never return, and time itself becomes the only student in the halls. Some say old schools are just empty buildings, but others whisper that they remember everything. Every laugh, every scream, every secret that was never meant to be heard again. Picture this. An old red brick schoolhouse standing at the edge of a forgotten town. The windows are broken, the roof sagging under years of neglect, yet the bell tower still points proudly toward the sky as if it refuses to admit defeat. For decades, hundreds of children passed through its doors, children who grew up, moved away, and left behind only their fading chalk marks on dusty blackboards. But when the town died, so did the school. And like many abandoned places, it didn't stay silent for long. Locals will tell you the school remembers. They say if you walk by on a winter evening when the wind rattles loose shutters, you'll hear faint echoes of children laughing. Not real laughter, but hollow, empty, as if carried by voices that no longer exist. Some have even sworn they heard the piano in the old music room playing by itself, a single note struck again and again, like a child refusing to stop practicing a song they never finished learning. But that's just the beginning, because inside the school, the air changes. The temperature drops. Shadows seem longer, darker, almost aware of your every move. People who dared to enter describe a strange heaviness, like the building itself is watching you. Dust hangs thick in the air, every step stirring memories of footsteps from long ago. You feel surrounded, even when you know you're alone. One story comes from a group of urban explorers, 3 friends in their 20s, armed with flashlights and cameras. They wanted adventure, nothing more. The plan was simple: sneak into the old Jefferson Elementary, film the decayed classrooms, and post the footage online. But what they captured was something no one could explain. The video begins with shaky laughter, their beams of light dancing across graffiti-covered walls, desks overturned, textbooks molded and rotting, lockers dented and rusted shut. The explorers joked nervously, trying to hide their unease until they reached the auditorium. That's when everything changed. The stage curtains, though tattered, still hung, and the wooden floor creaked under their weight. One of them whispered, "Do you hear that?" In the silence, faintly, there was the sound of children, dozens of them whispering all at once. Not loud, not clear, just a rush of hushed voices, as if a classroom was full of restless students waiting for the bell. Panicked, they swung their flashlights, but the room was empty. Chairs sat in neat rows, untouched for years, yet the whispers grew louder, overlapping, echoing against the walls. Terrified, one friend dropped the camera, and for just a second, as the lens tilted sideways, it caught something, the silhouette of a small figure at the back of the room, a child standing perfectly still, staring directly toward them. But when they picked the camera back up, the figure was gone. The explorers ran, stumbling through the halls, their voices frantic. "This way. Don't look back." The footage cut to black, ending with nothing but heavy breathing. When they posted it online, skeptics said it was fake, a trick of sound and shadow. But those who knew the history of Jefferson Elementary believed every second of it, because 50 years earlier, tragedy had struck inside those very walls. It was the winter of 1967. A fire broke out in the science lab, flames spreading through the halls before anyone could escape. Dozens of children were trapped. Some survived, but many did not. Parents waited outside screaming as smoke poured from the windows. Firefighters pulled charred desks and broken bodies from the wreckage. Since then, the school was never rebuilt, never reopened. It stood as a monument of grief, and some say a prison for restless souls who never left. Locals avoid the building now. Teenagers dare each other to break in, but most come running back within minutes, pale and shaken. Some say they've seen children's handprints appear on dusty windows from the inside. Others report hearing the old bell ringing, even though the rope was cut decades ago. And late at night, drivers passing by swear they've seen lights flickering in empty classrooms, as if lessons are still being taught to a class that no longer exists. But here's the strangest part. Not every story comes from reckless thrill seekers. Some come from respected townsfolk. A retired police officer once admitted off the record that he investigated strange activity there in the 80s. He'd been called out after neighbors reported voices and music coming from the school at night. At first, he thought it was squatters, but when he and his partner entered the building, they found nothing. Nothing except one classroom where fresh writing had appeared on the chalkboard. Two words, clear and deliberate, still here. The officer never spoke about it publicly, but his silence only fueled the legend. Because whether you believe in ghosts or not, there's no denying the power of places like this. Schools aren't just buildings, they're containers of childhood. They hold laughter, innocence, fear, failure, and memory. And when abandoned, all of that lingers, waiting, festering. So when people whisper about Jefferson Elementary, about the children who never went home, about the shadows that still walk its halls, maybe they're not telling ghost stories at all. Maybe they're telling the truth. And if you're still wondering whether the school is truly haunted, consider this. More than one visitor has described hearing a voice behind them as they walk away, a faint, pleading child's voice asking, "Teacher, can I go home now?" The question is, what would you answer? The voice still echoes in the minds of those who heard it. "Teacher, can I go home now?" A question so innocent, yet so chilling, because everyone knows no child has walked those halls in decades. And yet, the stories keep piling up, each darker than the last. In towns across the country, abandoned schools share the same eerie reputation. Their walls don't just rot, they whisper. Their halls don't just creak, they remember. And if Jefferson Elementary was one ghost story, it was far from the only one, because every forgotten school carries scars of its own. Take, for instance, the Willow Creek Academy, a once prestigious private school built in the late 1800s. The building still stands, ivy crawling up its cracked stone walls, its iron gates rusted shut. For years, it was the pride of the county, a place where wealthy families sent their children to learn manners, music, and mathematics. But hidden beneath that polished reputation was something darker. Former students tell unsettling tales. They speak of strict teachers who enforced silence so harshly. Children were punished simply for speaking out of turn. The basement was used as a detention hall, cold, damp, and windowless. Children would be locked inside for hours, sometimes longer. And when the school finally shut down in the 1930s, locals claimed the screams never left. Decades later, when the building was empty, strange things began to happen. Passers-by reported seeing pale faces staring out of broken windows, small, childlike faces with hollow eyes. Paranormal investigators who entered said they felt as if unseen hands brushed against their arms, tugging at their clothes like desperate children. One even swore they heard the sound of chalk scratching against the blackboard, writing words that no one was there to write. But the most disturbing story comes from a caretaker hired in the 1970s. His job was simple: keep trespassers out and prevent vandals from destroying what was left of the building. He stayed in a small office near the front, but each night he heard noises, footsteps on the upper floors, doors slamming, faint sobs echoing down the hall. At first he assumed it was intruders, but when he checked, the rooms were always empty. One night, he followed the sound of crying to the basement. His flashlight flickered as he descended the narrow stairs. The crying grew louder, echoing off the stone walls until he reached the bottom. What he saw nearly drove him mad. The old detention hall was lined with desks, untouched for years. But every single chair was filled, not by people, but by shadows. Dozens of dark, child-sized figures sat perfectly still, their heads bowed as if still being punished. In the silence, one lifted his head slowly and whispered, "Don't tell." The caretaker fled, never to return. He quit the very next morning and warned the owners never to send anyone there alone. And to this day, Willow Creek Academy remains locked. Its windows boarded, its grounds overgrown. But locals say on stormy nights, if you walk close enough, you'll hear a chorus of children crying from deep within its walls. What is it about schools that makes them such perfect vessels for hauntings? Perhaps it's the innocence that once filled them, the concentrated energy of laughter, fear, and discipline. Or maybe it's because schools are places of routine, of repetition, and when tragedy interrupts that rhythm, the echo never fades. Jefferson Elementary burned, Willow Creek Academy punished, and then there's Hollow Pines School, perhaps the most unsettling of them all. Hollow Pines was a small rural schoolhouse, one room, a single bell, nothing fancy. But in 1912, an epidemic swept through the town. Dozens of children fell ill, and the school was turned into a makeshift infirmary. Parents brought their sick sons and daughters, laying them across desks, hoping teachers could nurse them back to health. But medicine was scarce, and within weeks, most of those children were dead. The school shut down and never reopened. When hikers stumble upon the ruins of Hollow Pines today, they describe an unnatural stillness. Birds don't sing there. Animals don't linger. The bell tower collapsed long ago, but some say they've heard a faint ringing carried through the woods. a bell that no longer exists. More chilling are the reports of children's laughter echoing among the trees, always just out of sight, always too close to be the wind. One woman, a local historian, visited Hollow Pines at dusk, notebook in hand, determined to document the sight. She later wrote that as she stood inside the crumbling frame, the air grew heavy, thick with the smell of sickness, a smell she had never known but instantly recognized. She felt a tug at her sleeve, like a small hand pulling for attention, and then in the silence, a weak voice whispered, "It hurts." She dropped her notebook and ran, and when she returned the next morning to retrieve it, she found it resting neatly on a desk that hadn't stood upright for years. Each story adds to the chilling tapestry of abandoned schools. They are not merely empty shells of brick and wood. They are repositories of unfinished childhoods, of lessons never learned, of tragedies never resolved. And if you ask those who dared to enter, they'll tell you, schools never forget. But the real question is this: if these places are haunted, what do the spirits want? Are they seeking justice, forgiveness, or simply recognition? Or are they reenacting over and over the final moments of fear and pain that bound them to those classrooms forever? Because sometimes, late at night, when the wind carries those faint cries, you realize it isn't just about ghosts. It's about memory. And memory, when trapped, becomes something far more dangerous. And that's where the true horror begins. They say the further you go into these schools, the more they begin to change. It isn't just creaking floors or peeling paint anymore. It's the sensation that the building itself is alive, that every step you take is being counted, every breath measured, every movement watched. By the time explorers reach the deepest corridors, they often report the same thing, the overwhelming feeling that they were never meant to leave. Take the story of Marcus, a seasoned urban explorer who thought he had seen it all. Abandoned factories, decayed asylums, forgotten tunnels. But when he stepped inside the ruins of Hollow Pine School, he swore he felt a presence stronger than anything before. At first, it was subtle, a child's giggle echoing down the hall, too faint to record. Then came the doors. He said they opened slowly, one by one, as though invisible children were filing into class. His flashlight caught nothing but dust swirling in the air. Yet his camera picked up something else entirely. When he reviewed the footage later, faint outlines of small figures moved between the desks, shapes just tall enough to be children, darting in and out of shadows. Marcus left shaken, vowing never to return. But before he did, he scribbled something in his journal. The school doesn't want visitors, it wants students. And once you're inside, it doesn't want to let you go. He wasn't the only one. Paranormal investigators who entered abandoned schools across the country have reported patterns that are disturbingly similar. Equipment malfunctions the moment they set foot inside. Cameras drain instantly, batteries die without explanation. EVP recorders pick up whispers, not random static, but clear words: sit down, be quiet, teacher's coming. As though the classrooms are still in session, the lessons never truly ended. One group even captured something more chilling. While investigating the collapsed gymnasium of Jefferson Elementary, they left the recorder running overnight. The next morning, they played it back and heard the faint sound of a roll call, a teacher calling out names. Childlike voices answered one by one. But here's the part that no one could explain. The names matched the children who died in the fire of 1967. Every single one. Skeptics argue these are coincidences, tricks of the mind amplified by fear. And yes, fear has power. But how do you explain what happened to Emily Carter? She wasn't a thrill seeker, wasn't a ghost hunter. She was a photographer, known for capturing decayed beauty in forgotten places. When she entered the remains of Willow Creek Academy, she wanted nothing more than haunting images of crumbling architecture. But what she captured was something else entirely. In one photograph, the hallway stretched endlessly, light pouring in through cracked windows. But when she developed the photo, dozens of small figures lined the hall, children in uniforms, blurred but unmistakable. She hadn't seen them with her eyes, only through the lens. Emily quit photography after that. She said once you see them, you never stop seeing them. Even in her own home, she glanced at the corner of a room and swears she saw the outline of a child, head bowed, waiting. Others tell of more personal encounters. A man who wandered into a small abandoned schoolhouse in rural Kentucky claimed he heard the voice of his own childhood teacher, calling his name as if it were time for class again. Another visitor swore she felt her hand being taken by something small and cold, only to look down and see no one there. These stories are dismissed by many, But the consistency is what chills believers. Different people, different schools, yet the same experiences. But perhaps the most terrifying accounts come not from explorers, but from those who never even stepped inside. Residents living near these ruins often describe strange phenomena. Lights flickering in empty classrooms, the sound of a bell ringing in the dead of night, even the smell of smoke drifting from schools that burned down decades ago. One family living near Hollow Pines claimed their child began talking to an imaginary friend, a little girl in a school dress who said she didn't finish her lesson. They moved away within a year, refusing to speak of it again. Why do these schools hold such power? Some paranormal researchers suggest it's because children's energy is different, pure, unfiltered, and intense. When cut short by tragedy, that energy doesn't fade. It lingers, replaying itself endlessly. That's why many of the encounters feel like scenes repeating over and over. A teacher calling roll, a piano playing, a bell ringing. It's not just haunting, it's memory on loop refusing to die. But then there are darker theories. Some believe these schools are not haunted by children at all, but by something far older, far hungrier. That the tragedies created cracks in the walls between worlds and something slipped in, wearing the voices of children like masks. If true, then what explorers encounter aren't lost souls, but predators, and that would explain why so many who enter describe the same sensation. The school doesn't just want to scare you, it wants to keep you. And perhaps that's why, no matter how many times these buildings are boarded up, demolished, or buried under new construction, the stories never end. Because even if the school is gone, the memory remains rooted in the ground itself, a permanent scar. So when you hear the faint ringing of a school bell on the wind, or catch the sound of children laughing where no children should be, ask yourself, is it just memory echoing through time, or is it something waiting patient inside the ruins of a classroom that never truly closed? Because once you walk into those halls, you may not just be an observer anymore. You may become part of the lesson. Every story so far has been terrifying, but what comes next is the reason people say some schools should never be entered, not even in daylight. Because while many who wander inside abandoned classrooms come back shaken, whispering about voices and shadows, there are others who never return at all. And the mystery of their disappearance is what makes these places so much darker than just ghost stories. In 1999, two brothers from Ohio, both in their late teens, set out to film an overnight challenge inside the collapsed remains of Jefferson Elementary. They wanted to prove the legends wrong, to show the world that it was just an old building and nothing more. Their camcorder, recovered weeks later, told a very different story. The first hour of footage was ordinary jokes, laughter, nervous commentary as they explored dusty classrooms. Then came the sound. A faint bell rang, though no bell system had worked for decades. They laughed it off until the sound rang again, closer this time, sharper, as if it were right above their heads. In the video, one of them whispers, "That's impossible. The rope's been cut." Minutes later, the boys are seen running through the hallway, their laughter gone, their breaths heavy with panic. The camera catches fleeting glimpses of movement, small shadows darting across the walls, a figure peeking from a doorway, then vanishing. The brothers argue about which way to go, their voices trembling, and then the last words captured on tape, "Don't go in there," followed by the slam of a heavy door. The footage ends abruptly. Search teams combed through the school for days, but the brothers were never found. No footprints, no trace, no evidence they had ever been there except that abandoned camera. Cases like this are not isolated. Local archives hold police reports of missing persons tied to old schools, but most are quietly buried, attributed to unsafe structures or accidents. Yet the families who lose loved ones insist otherwise. They speak of dreams where their children appear still dressed in uniforms, still holding books, whispering, "I'm still in class." Theories swirl around these disappearances. Some believe the spirits of the schools claim new students, pulling them into their eternal lessons, forcing them to repeat the routine of forgotten days. Others believe the disappearances are the work of something far worse. Not children, not teachers, but something ancient, something that feeds on the memory of childhood. An entity that lurks in empty hallways, using the innocence of children's voices to lure in the living. One psychic who visited Hollow Pines described it as a trap of memory. She claimed the building itself was no longer a building, but a doorway. A place where the living and the dead blur together, where once you step inside, you're not just walking through broken walls, you're stepping into the past, into a nightmare that wants to keep you forever. Her warning was clear. When you hear them call your name, don't answer. The moment you do, you're theirs. Whether you believe in spirits or not, there's no denying that something lingers in these ruins. Too many stories, too many vanishings, too much fear. Perhaps it isn't about proving if ghosts are real. Perhaps it's about understanding that some places are scarred so deeply they can never heal. Schools where tragedy struck, where laughter turned to screams, where lessons ended in fire and sickness and silence. These places are not just haunted, they are cursed. And maybe that's the real lesson hidden in the shadows of abandoned schools. That the past does not always stay buried. That memory can clean the walls and floors and air, waiting for anyone foolish enough to walk through. And when they do, the school opens its doors again, ready for class to begin. So if you ever pass by one of these ruins and you hear the faint ring of a bell or the whisper of children playing where no children should be, keep walking. Don't look back. Don't listen. Because once you step inside, you may never leave. And if you're still wondering what happens to those who disappear inside, maybe they're not gone at all. Maybe right now they're sitting at their desk in a classroom that doesn't exist anymore, answering roll call for eternity, waiting for the next visitor to join them. Some doors should never be opened. Some halls should never be walked. And some schools should remain empty forever. But tell me, if you were standing at the entrance of one of these schools, the wind pushing the doors open just enough to invite you in, would you dare to take a step? Backhand index, pointing. Right, if this story sent chills down your spine, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more haunting tales. And stay tuned, because the next story may be even closer to home than you think.